Tonight, we're looking at 3 real mysteries: a lighthouse, and something that began as ordinary as a trip to a cellar, and the most disturbing unsolved murder cases in European history. 3 stories, 3 mysteries. And in each case, investigators were left trying to understand what really happened. So if you're a fan of the dark, strange and mystery, don't forget to subscribe, like and share to Hardy's Conundrum for more content. So without further ado, let's get into today's story. In December of 1900, 3 men were working a job where very few people would ever volunteer for. They were lighthouse keepers stationed on a small rocky island off the coast of Scotland called Island Moor, part of a remote chain of islands known as the Flannan Isles. Their responsibility was pretty much simple: keep the lighthouse lamp burning. So ships traveling through the dangerous Atlantic waters depended on that light to avoid crashing into the jagged cliff surrounding the island. But the job came with a cost: isolation. Now the island had no towns, no farm, and no other people. Just wind, waves, and endless ocean. The 3 keepers stationed there that winter were James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. Every few weeks, a supply ship would arrive bringing food, mail, and fresh equipment. Now for the 3 men stationed on the island in December 1900, that ship was scheduled to arrive shortly after Christmas. So on December 26, the supply ship finally appeared through the mist, but almost immediately, the crew noticed something strange. Normally, one of the lighthouse keepers would be waiting near the landing area. Sometimes they would even wave from the tower, but that morning, no one was there to welcome the ship. The captain sounded the ship's horn. The echo rolled across the cliff. Still nothing. Eventually, a relief keeper named Joseph Moore climbed the steep path up to the lighthouse, where he reached the door and he noticed it was closed but not locked. Inside, everything looked strangely normal. The beds were neatly arranged, the oil lamps were clean and ready, but the lighthouse keepers were nowhere to be found. Then Moore entered the kitchen and noticed something unsettling. A chair had been knocked over, the clock had stopped, and on the table there were signs that a meal had been prepared, but it had never been eaten. So 3 experienced lighthouse keepers out of nowhere had vanished. Investigators were soon sent to the island to determine what had actually happened. So they began searching both the lighthouse and the surrounding cliffs. Now near the western landing area, they discovered significant storm damage. Heavy metal railings had been bent, a large storage box had been displaced. Somehow it looked as if a powerful wave had struck the rocks, and authorities believe the men may have gone outside to secure equipment during a storm. Now to give a little bit of experience, in such conditions, a rogue wave could easily sweep someone into the sea. If one man had been taken by the wave, the others might have rushed to help him, and in the process, all 3 could have been lost. No bodies were ever recovered, and no witness ever saw what truly happened on that island. Even today, the disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers remain one of the most mysterious maritime incidents ever recorded. Now this next story is something unexpected. Something you have in your homes. Something that you used to have meal on a daily basis. Maybe to some culture. But this next story will make you wonder how such simple things can actually be a tragedy. Now on a quiet rural farm, daily life followed a simple rhythm. Meals were cooked at the same time each evening. Animals were fed before sunset, and vegetables were stored in a small cellar beneath the farmhouse. The cellar was nothing unusual, just a narrow staircase leading underground into a cool beam room where sacks of potatoes and other vegetables were kept for the winter. So the story goes that one evening, the grandmother of the family went down to the cellar stairs to collect some potatoes for dinner. Now it should have taken, less than a minute for her to bring back those potatoes, but she never came back. Now after several minutes passed, her son walked into the cellar door and called down the stairs, wondering where his mother could have been. But there was no answer, thinking she might have slipped or needed help. So the son went downstairs to check on her, and he also didn't return. Now the family became concerned. The man's wife also followed down into the cellar to see what had happened, and she also never came back. And finally, their daughter approached the cellar and started descending the steps. But halfway down, she suddenly felt dizzy. The air felt heavy. Instinctively, she stepped back and ran upstairs. Now the decision likely saved her life. Now when the neighbors later investigated the cellar, they found several members of the family collapsed on the floor. Authorities will later on be called to investigate further. Now what has happened? All the family members that went down to the cellar all found dead. Now at first, investigators suspected poisoning, but no contaminated food was found in the house. Then they considered foul play, perhaps. But there were no injuries, no signs of struggle, and no evidence anyone else had entered the property. The cellar itself appeared normal, but while examining the room more closely, investigators noticed several sacks of potatoes that had begun to rot, and further testing revealed that the decaying potatoes were releasing gases. In an enclosed underground cellar with poor ventilation, those gases had accumulated over time, and among them was hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas capable of causing unconsciousness within seconds. So investigators concluded that the grandmother had entered the cellar first and had been overcome by the gas, and each family member who followed unknowingly stepped into the same invisible cloud, one after another, and only the daughter of the family that survived that encounter. In 1922, a farming family lived on an isolated property in Bavaria, Germany, known as the Hinterkaifeck. The farm stood alone between fields and forests, far from other homes. Life there was quiet and quite predictable. But in the weeks before the tragedy, the farmer, Andreas Gruber, began noticing something strange. There's this one day where he discovered footprints in the snow leading from the forest towards the farmhouse, but there were no footprint leading back. So someone had actually walked into the farm but never left. Around the same time, the family began hearing footsteps in the attic at night, and Gruber searched the attic but found no one. Then one morning he found newspaper in the house that no one in the family had purchased. Shortly after that, a set of house keys went missing. Now despite these strange events, the family continued their normal routines. If you were to ask me, I would have already done something, to investigate or to do something, because this is utmost strange event that is happening in my house. But as I mentioned, the family continued their normal routines, like as if nothing had actually happened in their house. Now on the evening of 31st of March 1922, something terrible happened. One by one, members of the family were lured into a barn. There, they were attacked with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. 4 members of the family were unalive in that barn, and inside the house, the killer murdered the remaining 2 victims, the family's maid and a young child who was sleeping in a crib. And after all that, the crime did not immediately come to light. For several days, no one realized anything was wrong. The animals on the farm continued to be fed. Smoke was seen rising from the chimney. Someone had been living in the house. And on April 4th, 1922, the bodies were discovered when neighbors entered the farm after the family failed to appear at church and the children missed school. Now inside the barn, 4 bodies were found hidden beneath hay. The other 2 victims were discovered inside the house. Autopsies later revealed that all 6 victims had been killed by blows to the head from the mattock. Investigators soon realized something even more disturbing. Evidence suggested that the killer had remained on the farm for several days after the murders. The animal had been fed, food had been eaten from the kitchen, the fireplace had been used. Someone had continued living there, inside the same house as the victims. Police questioned numerous suspects and investigated the case for years. But despite the evidence and many theories, no one was ever convicted. Now, it's been more than a century later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most famous unsolved crime. So with that, we end the 3 mysteries, 3 real incidents that actually had happened. So if you're a fan of such story, the dark, the strange, and the mystery, don't forget again to like, share, and subscribe to Hardest Conundrum for more content. Till next time, bye-bye.